Emperors, and welcome to Pluto in Aquarius. It is 11 p.m. my time on March 23rd, 2023, and I'm just checking my phone, but the Pluto should have gone into Aquarius. Yep, there we go. A few hours ago. Now I'm doing this late at night because I did the Saturn and Pisces one and it was so long. So, standing in between me and going to bed is this video. So I'm going to try and keep it as tight and concise as possible. I may actually end up doing another one like maybe next year when we've had a better idea of what the energy's like. Anyway, this is one of the images that was released of Pluto from, can't remember the name of the mission that went to it. And the thing that I love about it is the planet of death and destruction, has this big old heart on it, So that was one of my favorite things. Now, let's talk about some key events. So the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius was from 1778 to 1798. So there is literally nobody alive today who can tell us what this energy is like. And we don't know what people with this energy behave like because we have no precedent. Obviously, from this list of events that I'll be going through with you that happened from 1778 to 1798, we can get some clues of what can be happening. Also because Pluto and Uranus are generational. I mean, Pluto's not even a generational. He's societal. He is the planet of evolution because it takes so long to push things forward. So, or for him to make a trip around the entire zodiac. So he is really societal evolution. How generations change from one to the other. He is the planet of generations. And then Uranus, which takes 84 years around, some people may live to see their Uranus return. So that's also generational, but in a briefer way. So here are the dates. Pluto is in Aquarius from March 23rd today until June 11th, and then he's going to dip back into Capricorn, clean up this banking mess, or at least try and fix something. And he will then stay there for the rest of the year. So right now we just get like a little taste. And in fine dining, they call it an amuse-bouche, which is like the little tiny thing that comes before your fancy meal. So you can get an idea of the quality of the chef and what's about to come. So, the next 3 months-ish should give us a good idea of what's going to happen. January 20th, and then it comes back into Aquarius January 20th until September 1st. Then he goes back into Capricorn again. So clearly there's some things that are going to be persisting. And then finally, November 19th, 2024, he is definitively in Aquarius until March 8th of 2043. At which point he will then dance back and forth between Pisces and Aquarius. Now, I have taken from Wikipedia, just selected, these are almost all of them, but not all of them, just selected kind of the key ones. These are events that happened between 78 and 98. So first, the Royal Batavian Society of Arts and Sciences is established by a group of Dutch intellectuals. Institution is a pioneer of scientific efforts. These are all Uranian Aquarius words. Outbreak, that's also Uranus because he is the heir of the indigenous rebellion. That is Aquarius as well, against Spanish colonization. Serfdom is abolished. Serfdom is essentially a form of slavery. The Montgolfier brothers invent the hot air balloon. Aquarius is an air sign and is of the sky. The Russian Empire annexes the Crimea, so that's obviously very active right now. The Treaty of Paris formally ends the American Revolutionary War. A Chechen warrior and Muslim mystic leads a coalition of Muslim Caucasian tribes, 11th house Aquarian words, from throughout the Caucasus in a holy war against Russian settlers. And we'll talk about war in a second. Then we have the Northwest Indian War is fought between the United States and Native Americans, trying to overthrow the invaders, right? That's also very Uranian. Freed slaves from London establish Freetown in present-day Sierra Leone. Again, Aquarius is all about freedom. Inconfidencia Minera, conspiracy against the colonial authorities in Brazil, again, against the authorities. Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. This, you do not get more Aquarian than this. And then there's a tiny little theme that comes up. There was the French Revolution, the Liège Revolution, the Brabant Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the White Lotus Revolution, and the Irish Rebellion. So that should give you a really good synthesis of what's going to be coming up over the next 20 years. Now, as always, let's start with the players. And the first one we want to start with is Pluto, the god of the underworld, also known as Hades. Pluto was also the god of wealth because diamonds and other jewels and minerals come from underground because Pluto rules that which lies beneath. Pluto is also the ruler of things you cannot control. Death, taxes, sex, patterns. And he is very much about, he's very much about control. And when you, and your power, and the sense of power that you have. And if you are powerless, or if you feel powerless, the only way you get power is through struggle, right? There's a famous saying that, like, when God wants you courageous, he doesn't send you courage, he sends you challenges. So what Pluto does is he takes away your power so that you're forced to fight back. Now, here's a list of keywords that are associated with Pluto. Not many are very lovely, abuse, birth, death, rebirth, collective shadow, collective unconscious, compulsions, dark drives, darkness, death, decay. Pluto is not a fun guy. He is the intensity. I mean, he is the lord of the underworld. So, you can't really have like a good time guy doing so. He lives in the dark most of the time and he collects the dead, So Pluto's job is to show you the darkness, right? Because we all want to stay in the light, but we forget that there's a whole other side to things. Light does not exist without dark. And so he brings it up, and it's his job to dig it up. He is also on top of all these things here, and I thought I wrote it, but I may have to come back to it. He is responsible for triangles and triangulation. So you may have heard, like, dealing with narcissists. One of narcissists' favorite tactics is triangulation, right? Like, I love you, A. Oh no, I love B. Because then A starts to want me back again, and then B wants me. So there's always, like, I can always play someone else off the other. Like, I love you more. No, I love you more. No, I love you more. And that takes away their power, gives them back. Takes away, it reminds, or it places the person who is triangulating at the head, literally the top of the triangle, of that. So he's pulling the strings, and that's what Pluto loves to be. He likes to set up these little triangulation situations. And people who are very Plutonian in nature tend to, you'll find that They tend to have power issues with people. I have a very Plutonian chart, so this is definitely true for me. My sun is in opposition to Pluto, and people tend to have a visceral reaction to me. As Pluto is about extremes, people will either love me or they'll hate me, but I rarely get someone who's like, oh no, she seems like an okay person. They're either like, oh my God, this is the energy that I want to be with, or oh my God, I can't stand that person and they scare me. I actually, I found out uh, years after I was in high school that they used to call me the Enchantress because of my black hair and green eyes, and that everyone was scared of me because they thought I had like magical powers. And I was like, I wish I knew that because I would have doubled down on that. At least that would have been interesting. Anywho, so yes, Pluto can be about extremes. People who are Plutonian, so if any of your natal planets are touched by an aspect to Pluto, that planet is going to be more intense, a little bit more compulsive, more obsessive, more I need to have. Pluto wants what he wants, and it's not up for discussion. And actually, that's a really good segue because rather than go into like different explanations, I figured I would start with the most famous story that most of us know about Pluto, and one that is just quintessentially Plutonic because it has everything in it. And so if you go to some of the websites, there is a very whitewashed version of this situation. Now, what you're looking at here is called in fine art, the rape of Proserpina. He was called Hades and Persephone, Pluto and Proserpina, always same people. But this is essentially him abducting her. Although the word in Italian, il ratto, is essentially rape. Now, there's a whitewashed version on the internet on a famous like academic wisdom site or scholarly site, and it says Pluto is generally known as the god of the underworld, not necessarily something you think of when you see Mickey's Yellow Companion, right? Because there was that friendly dog named Pluto. And it says, but after Cupid shot an arrow in the heart of Pluto, the god of the underworld fell in love with Persephone. Not long after, he became Persephone's husband, right? Like, the story is so much more torpid and ridiculous than that. And that's what Pluto hates. Like, he would hate that version of the story. That's the one we like to give. And that's the one he's like, nah, give me the goods. Give me the depth, the gory details. Like, he wants to dig into everything. So the more full version is that Pluto was a bachelor, right? Just kind of minding his own business, doing what he had to. And Venus decides that she wants to see him in love. So she has Cupid shoot an arrow at Pluto with a spell that the next person he would see, he would fall madly in love with, right? So already there, control issues, right? He's deciding for her. So struck by Cupid's arrow, the first person that happened to be passing by was his niece, who is Persephone or Proserpina. He promptly carries her off. You can see how happy she is about being carried off. Carries her off into the underworld to be his bride. Now, Ceres, or Demeter, who is the mother of Persephone, Proserpina, became frantic that her daughter was missing. And she was searching all over the land. And because she was so focused on searching, she was the goddess of the crops. So there was a huge famine. And everything became barren. And Jupiter / Zeus couldn't let this happen. So he says to Hermes, to go down to the underworld and go get Persephone or Proserpina. And Hermes was one of the only ones who could travel in between worlds without any harm. So so Hermes, lets Pluto know. He's like, I'm coming. And Pluto's like, sure. But, remember, she can only go if she doesn't eat anything, because that was the law of the land, that if you ate in the underworld, then you were a permanent visitor, or permanent resident of the underworld. Uh, and there's the numbers vary here. Some say she eats 4, and others say she eats 6 pomegranate seeds. And in some accounts, it says that Persephone actually tells people that Hades forced her to eat something. And the quotes are, but he stealthily put in my mouth a food, honey sweet, a pomegranate seed, and compelled me against my will and by force to taste it. Now, pomegranates were historically synonymous with fertilization. So, there's kind of like a double entendre of what that pomegranate seed is. There's been always a strong association between fruit and sex, if you remember the apple in the Bible. So she leaves the underworld with Hermes, and she goes back to her mom, and her mom's first question is, did you eat anything? And she says, yes, I ate the pomegranate seeds. And Ceres is destroyed because she knows this means that she now has to send her daughter back to the underworld, because that's the law. And so she goes back into her depression. And Jupiter's like, I can't have this. I can't have Ceres so upset. We have to do something. So he makes a deal with Pluto. And he's like, for the number of seeds that Persephone's eaten, she would live with Pluto. And for the rest, she would live with her mother. And this is how the seasons were born, because the months that Persephone was down in Hades, there was no growth. So that would be the fall or the winter seasons. And then when she came back onto Earth, or onto the mainland, I guess, or the main world, then spring and summer happened. Now, there's a plot twist to all this, because there's actually there's other myths that mention that Persephone was very jealous. And I'll read this from the thing I was saying. So this fact leads us to think that perhaps some scholars of the myth are pointing out that Persephone was not so innocent and was in love with Hades. They believe that the abduction was a trick to be able to be with the god of the underworld without losing its reputation or the affection of the mother. They also believe that she ingested the 4 seeds of the fruit specifically to be able to meet with Hades for a few months each year. So in this story, we've got everything, right? Manipulation, obsession, sex, loss of control, sacrifice, patterns, the whore virgin split, triangulation, seizing what you want, acting first, apologizing later. So this is about as Plutonian as you can get in trying to describe the energy. Now, moving on to Uranus. Uranus was the father sky, the ancient Greek personification of the heavens, and for a while the ruler of the known universe. Fatherless, he was conceived by Gaia alone, with whom he formed the primordial couple. So Gaia is, of course, Mother Earth, who I don't know how they make it, but somehow birthed the Uranus. And then they got married because, stuff was weird. However, he was a cruel husband, and he didn't allow any of his children to leave the womb of his mother, which eventually led to a rebellion. Do you remember that word from the activities above? And his demise at the hands of his son Cronus, who is Saturn. And so the story of the son rebelling against the father, the oppressed rebelling against the institution. And the mythology has it that Saturn actually cut Uranus's testicles off And the sperm that fell from the sky is what populated planet Earth. So technically, Uranus is all of our crazy baby daddy. He is Pluto's grandfather. And if you think about it, skipped generations tend to get along better. So these two together can be kind of a hot mess. Is kind of what you have two people who are essentially crazy in different ways. Like one is incredibly obsessive, the other is like, let's blow shit up. And they're going to be hanging out together. Now, Uranus is offbeat in every way possible. And even in the planet, this is like one of my favorite things. And they only discovered this a few years ago, that the North Pole and the South Pole of Uranus is on its side. So whereas our North Pole is north and our South Pole is south, the North Pole of Uranus, because of the way it spins, would be like our east-west axis. So even there, he's like unusual, unique, different. So Uranus represents how you seek the freedom to express your individuality. Uranus is where you fly your freak flag, where you have that thing that you feel like you need to hide from other people. If you have Venus in Aquarius, like I do, you are attracted to offbeat characters. You like people who are a little bit, you need people who are very intelligent, but also a little bit weird, like normal people who go through daily routines does not belong to the world of Aquarius. So the keywords for Uranus are change, disruption, and revolution, which we have seen before. And the need is the urge for originality and independence from the old traditions, which is so interesting that he requires independence and ended up being thrown over by his son, who is the king of order, right? So that's a whole funny thing. But anyway, Uranus is the need for change and excitement. And sometimes that can be good, unconventional, respect for freedom, revolutionary. He can also be a crazy-ass fascist, as we saw with the whole birth story. Now, here's some other keywords for Uranus. They're less intense than Pluto's. Creativity, desire for change, eccentric, electricity, excitement, experimentation. It's like, new, give me more, which is the same kind of, Pluto is obsessive in the same way, like he wants more, but he wants more because like, he wants more of the same thing. Whereas Uranus is like, I want more, but no, like this is bored of that. So it's an interesting kind of, there's a match on compulsion and destruction. Like where they overlap are kind of like the places that you don't want two things to overlap. But, and he is unexpected and unpredictable. And this is where I feel like a Pluto that would normally be quite strategic in Aquarius is gonna have a sense of a loss of control at times, right? And so it could be war out of nowhere, things bubbling up from underneath out of nowhere. So you may suddenly find yourself, especially if you are affected by Uranus or Pluto directly from your personal planets, suddenly boiling up with rage and like you just like explode out of nowhere. Now expect that on a mundane level, meaning that like it's not necessarily going to happen to people, it's going to happen to generations. So hold on. So I'm just looking at my notes here. Okay, so Aquarians, as you said, they're drawn to the unique. Many can be asexual or just have kind of like weird kinks. And I think that's definitely something I think we'll be seeing a plethora of kind of unspoken or taboo sex things coming out. And that's the other thing about Pluto. I don't remember where I wrote it, but the difference is that, so Uranus is exalted in Scorpio, and there he likes to show you, because there's a whole world to discover there, right? He gets to go underground. It's all new and it's all murky and it's not clear, and he's got a, it's like, oh, that kind of like weird, creepy party, or that could be interesting. So he has this whole world to explore in Scorpio, and it's of the mind. So there it's like he wants to show you the dark side. In this case, Pluto's going to make us experience. So we will live the dark side of things. And it's kind of like a fuck around, find out thing, except you didn't know that was fucking around, right? It's like something will find you or something will come to you. When you are very Plutonian, the situations seem to happen to you, but it's actually an energy that's coming from you or people responding to you. And you can have people who are very Plutonian can have sort of intense energies, or like really weird things happen to them in their life. And of course, it depends on the placement. Pluto moon contacts are almost always synonymous with either sexual abuse as a child or emotional abuse as a child. It's pretty intense. But anyway, back to Uranus. So Uranus people or Aquarians are very distant, unemotional, do not do well with one-to-one relationships. And there's a famous line for Aquarians, which is that they hate people, but they love humanity. And so anything that's going to be, the transformation is really going to be focused on freeing humanity, not the individuals, but the concept of humanity. So what can we do for humanity, humanitarian issues, things like that. You will also find that Uranus energy is very fixed. You will never change an Aquarian's mind about anything. And so that was kind of like what I was saying, like Uranus can be very obstinate. Pluto is obsessive. So there may be these kind of like weird things where we see showdowns between two countries, two factions, two businesses, that each one is like digging in their heels, like threatening war. No one's going to cave. And then ultimately what we're going to see is really people waking up to the fact that there is power in numbers, and that if they organize themselves, they can overthrow the single master, that there is sheer power in the size of humanity against the single despot. Now, moving on to this is a quote that I found here that was used to describe, it was from a book that was used to describe the period of time in the late 1800s. So when Pluto was in Aquarius the first time. And it says, centuries of custom and tradition were brushed aside in favor of exploration, individualism, tolerance, and scientific endeavor, which, in tandem with developments in industry and politics, witnessed the emergence of the modern world. So I think what we're going to see is, okay, so first, 100% the next 20 years will be known as the AI revolution. If this late period in the 18th century, was known as the end of the Enlightenment and the closing, like the heart of the Industrial Revolution, what you are going to find now is intelligence is the key word. Transformation of intelligence. And the dark side of intelligence, the dark side of artificial intelligence. And I'm fairly certain that the world that we will see in 2043 is going to be vastly different than where we are today, right? Total shift. They discovered flight in during the last period, and now because of the AI technology and all this tech innovations that's going on, there's some insane stuff that they've been working on in labs. Like sometimes you just wish science would take a vacation. And now science is definitely going to double down on what's going to happen. Like we now have the ability to grow meat in a petri dish, right? And so if you are able to start that clonation process, then the challenge is simply how to speed it up. And it won't take them long to figure that out, because that's just inevitably what happens. Once they've cracked the code, then it's just a matter of how do we make that happen faster. So we are not too far off from those creepy those science fiction thing like Star Trek, when they would walk up to something and like order a meal and it would just pop out of a tube. Like that is no longer science fiction. It's almost 100% an actionable reality. There is genetic coding work that is happening in Silicon Valley, where you can choose the genes of your children. Now, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more developments of these. They've been going on for a long time, but I think the general public is going to start hearing about them and start being like, what the actual fuck? Because the people, just like Silicon Valley Bank, right? They were up to no good and nobody was looking, but everybody knew what was going on. They had already received multiple warnings from the government and they just chose to ignore them. So Silicon Valley has been working in silence and off the public radar on some insane shit that is going to start being released over the next few years. And I think when these things hit the general public, then that's when the shit's going to hit the fan, right? And if there was an industrial revolution in the late 18th century, excuse me, we will definitely be seeing a speed up in the robotic revolution, where the question is, what role does man play, right? Death and rebirth of humanity in terms of intelligence is like, okay, well, and I'm not saying the robots are going to take over, because they still need a person to program them. That's the problem. And anyone who's used the chat GPT knows that it's only as good as what currently exists. So innovation is always going to have to come from mankind. Anyway, I have a whole position on AI that I think it's going to end up fucking us in the end. But anyway, there will definitely be a revolution about artificial intelligence that happens over the next 20 years. Now, how this is, so some things, you may have a total shift in who your tribe is. You may have a total shift in your sexuality. You may become obsessed with the internet, obsessed with astrology. You may have weird, intense encounters with offbeat people. You can be lured into an online sex cult. You may change generational or ancestral habits. You could rewrite the future of your people. New declarations of how family lines are going to behave or what belongs to them, seizing back power from when it has been taken away. How this affects you personally is going to depend on the house where Pluto falls and the aspects that it makes to personal planets through the transit in your natal chart. If you have planets in the fixed degrees, those are the ones that Pluto's going to be bothering for the next 20 years. And then, of course, also any planets that are directly connected through Pluto in your natal. So yes, again, on a mundane level, on top of the artificial intelligence age, um, there's definitely going to be a flurry of revolutions. We've seen the Iranian women's movement continuing. I expect there to be a number of coups d'etat all over the place. There has been a prediction that when Saturn and Neptune meet at the Aries point in March 2026, which will sextile Pluto, that this is possibly a war between the US and China over Taiwan. Um, I expect us to be hearing also news about air pollution and air quality. People, I imagine, will also get more militant about climate change. As I said before, lots of sexual perversions that breed on the internet will sort of be brought to light. I also expect to see major innovations in like hidden diseases, blood diseases, viral diseases. As we said before, lots of insane tech inventions. And basically, we're going to see the good and the bad of all the tech that's been produced over the last few years, and just some really wacky out there stuff that you didn't even think was possible. And of course, because every reaction produces an equal and opposite reaction, all this is going to swing the pendulum forward. A coalition of people that don't want to move forward are going to pop up. And that's where the tension is going to kick in. So it's definitely going to be an interesting next 20 years. Anyway, like I said, I'll probably end up doing like a second video maybe next year, when we've had like a better idea of what this looks like. But that's just a starting point for you, and I hope this was interesting and or helpful. Take care. I'll see you at the next video.